Welcome back to the Expanded Minds podcast. Today, I have a special guest with me, and her name is Amber. Amber is a founder of Quantum Kingdom Coaching, where she helps people learn how to become co creators with God. The reason why I have Amber with me today is because of her heart to share deeper mystical truths with the world and desire to create a better world with God in it. So, Amber, my opening question will be, what events have shaped you to who you are today?
It's a really big question. So I guess starting off, I would say that when I was younger, I suffered with chronic epilepsy, really bad epilepsy to the point where I actually died one time. They had to stop my heart because I was seizing so hard that I wasn't going to come out of it. I'm pretty sure it lasted for like 3.5 hours. I was told that I was never going to grow out of it. I used to be in a wheelchair. My mom used to spoon feed me, and I was told that I was never going to be able to drive. And I had a really bad memory, and then, like, by the grace of God, I was healed from that. So over my events in life, my life has been really supernatural, and my life has been really miraculous. So I think that that's really what shaped me, is that I see that something higher is always moving on my behalf. When I was growing up, I used to like get spiritually attacked all the time. I would always have things like whispering my name. I've had things touching me, things that I couldn't see that would touch me, that would try to talk to me, things that would torment me every time that my family fell asleep. And when I had died one time, when I seized out and I died, I actually remember seeing Jesus. So I remember that every time that I'd be attacked, I would know to call on the name of Jesus Christ, and it would actually like get me free from these things that were trying to come into contact with me and torment me. So I would say that that was really the beginning to me understanding a spiritual reality and walking in that and wanting to get in touch with something higher.
Wait, how old are you when all this is happening?
So I started having seizures when I was 6. The demonic attacks started happening as long as I can remember. I have a lot of like I don't have a lot of childhood memory because of the epilepsy, but if I remember anything, it was like it was getting attacked. Like I remember one night I was at my house and I was laying there with my eyes closed, but I wasn't sleeping, and I felt something like taking my face and moving it up and down, and I opened my eyes and my cheeks would be moving up and down. So I would say that probably started at like 10, and then it really lasted all the way into my adult life. But when I learned how to claim authority over it, and then like the attacks like picked up like to the point where like physical objects would be flying around my house. I've had things fly off my walls, sleep paralysis and stuff like that, and then I learned how to take authority over it. And I think that that's really the beginning to my relationship with God and in a bigger reality.
So you were experiencing like poltergeist activity, sleep paralysis. Were you actually like seeing stuff like um how to how to describe seeing stuff? Because if you're seeing spirits, like are you seeing it like as real as like material creation, or is it a little bit like holographic when you're seeing it? Like how do
See,
you
this is the thing for me. Like a lot of people see spirits. I've never actually seen a physical spirit. I would hear them like I've heard them like breathe in my ear. They would whisper my name. They would try to talk to me. Things flying around, things physically touching me, but I've never actually seen it. And thank God that I've never seen it, because I don't think that I could mentally handle that.
okay. And then tell me about like your encounter with Jesus, you said. Like what was that? What was that like?
So when I was little, I just remember it's a really vague memory. I just remember seeing like some type of like gate or entrance, and I remember seeing Jesus, and he nicely and softly spoken to me that it wasn't my time yet. And that's really all that was. But it hit me so hard, and it's always stuck with me. But I had another encounter with Christ, and I guess this is really when I had my big spiritual awakening, as far as like reality and the makeup of reality and consciousness, like a spiritual enlightened moment. And the day before, around that time period in my life, I had been praying for like 8 to 10 hours a day. and I was reading so much material. I had read the Hindu Bible, I had read the Quran, I read the Gnostic Gospels, the forgotten books of the Bible, and I started having these visions, and it was the world, and it was all the pain in the world, and I saw tanks and children starving, and just all this negative like stuff that really weighed on my heart, and it was really like way too much to bear. So I was in my bathroom the next day, and I was sitting on the edge of my bathtub, and I was actually smoking a cigarette, and I was just thinking, and then all of a sudden I felt this presence, and I had felt the presence of God. I had felt the presence of the Holy Spirit. I was completely sober, and all of a sudden I felt this feeling, and I knew that it wasn't just the presence of God, but that Jesus Christ himself was in my bathroom. And it was like my whole body involuntary threw itself on the floor, and I got down on all fours, and everything that I had ever felt bad for doing, it just came spewing out of my mouth like vomit. And in that moment, like how I felt like really dirty. I felt really shameful. I felt so small. But I was aware that that's the way that I felt. And I just felt so much love and so much compassion and so much grace. And then all of a sudden, I was aware that I was no longer in my bathroom. I don't know how to explain it. In scripture, sometimes the apostles say out of body or in body. I do not know because I don't know how it happened. I just know that I was in my bathroom, and all of a sudden I wasn't. And I was standing within this light, and there was light within light that was within the light. And Christ was standing in front of me, and his face was so bright that I couldn't look at his face because it was like blinding, but in a good way. And I looked at his torso, and he didn't physically say anything to me. I could see his hair in the wind. I could see his shoes, and he just intuitively infused me, if that makes any sense. But it didn't happen in words.
Yeah,
So
that
that
does
was
make sense.
my second encounter. Yeah.
That's a there's a lot that I want to mention there. Well, first off, like when you're talking about like the pain of the world, when you like were experiencing that and you're seeing a bunch of stuff happen in a vision, was that because I saw on your YouTube channel in one of your videos you said you were on a mountaintop and you saw like um was it that experience right there, or was that
No.
different? Okay.
No, that was different. So, through all the confusion and trying to like read the Bible and other religions, and obviously knowing God since I was little, I asked where I was going. I asked what the afterlife was going to be. I asked where I was headed, trying to not pass any judgment. Like I just asked God directly. And that night, you can say that was a dream, but it wasn't a dream. I woke up bawling my eyes out. It was so real. So I asked God where I was going, and I had this dream, and it was like a lucid dream. And I was sitting on top of this mountain, and this mountain overlooked everything in creation. And I was so full, and I was so happy and so full of ecstasy. I knew that I could have sat there for an eternity, and I never would have wanted or needed anything. I literally could have sat in the same spot for eternity and never moved and been completely whole. And at that moment, I knew that I was in God, and I was aware in the lucid dream that like God was in all, that I was in God, that God was in me, and I was looking at God and I was breathing him in. And honestly, after I had that dream, I woke up crying that night. And then it made it really hard to want, like, it made it hard to actually be alive because I was aware of what being whole actually felt like. And then I woke back up in this reality.
I like that. I guess getting a little bit into my story. Well, first off, I want to mention the fact that these are spiritual states that people can access. Like I think that when people look at Christianity or just religions in general, there's like it seems like a very bland thing to experience. But there's like levels, or I would say dimensions that you can experience to where you have that amount of serenity inside of you. Um, but going a little bit like into my story, like when I was 17, I had my own, you could say, spiritual awakening. And uh, there was a moment because I didn't know what the heck was going on to be, or everything happened very all at once. So I didn't
Uh-huh.
necessarily have the intellect to be able to share what I was going through. I didn't have words to kind of say what I was going through, but um, there was a moment where somebody came up to me because I was just so aware of God. Like every single moment, it was like I just knew there was God. Like there was something watching me, and I can feel it. And like how you said, like I was breathing it in, and I was just so aware. And then someone came up because I would talk about God to my friends a lot in high school, and I'd always be praying for people, stuff like that. And then there was a moment where someone came up to me and asked me, like, "How are you so aware of God?" And then that's when it hit me where I was just like, "Wait." Or first off, I asked myself, I was like, "Aren't
You think
Christians or aren't
everybody is.
what?" Yeah, I thought
You like
everybody
to
was
think
like that.
everybody is. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, "Wait, aren't don't you experience that?" Because you're, I was, because I was like, "Don't Christians aren't? Isn't that what a normal Christian is supposed to be experiencing or something?" Um, but that was when I realized that what I was experiencing wasn't necessarily normal, or not everybody was experiencing that. Um, so I was in a very high spiritual state. I didn't even know it. Um, so from there though, it was like you go through different seasons in your life of like being in those high spiritual states and ecstasies, and then you just plummet right down into, you could say, the dark night of the soul, and you lose that conscious awareness, and you have to like sort out and purge out a lot of subconscious material that is blocking you from certain things that you can access within yourself. So it's interesting going on this journey in general and living consciously and intently. I think that's very important that we all try to strive to live like that. So
It's a lot of work, and I really believe that they have it set up. I mean, this is where I'm going to sound like a conspiracy theorist. Whoever the top people are, whoever the elite are, whoever runs the world, they know what they're doing, and they have humans and society set up to where they keep you so busy and so distracted and so focused on worrying and making money in the fear that you don't have time to self-identify. Because if you have the time to isolate and self-identify and become aware, God resides within you, so it makes you aware of God. And then you would have the time to come to all this knowledge and revelation and understanding, and we wouldn't need them, and it would not be the same type of world. And I really believe that's what the Great Awakening is, and there's a quickening in it. So I just wanted to throw that in there because I really believe that they make it so we can't self-identify, and we don't have time to self-identify. Like even Jesus, he would go out into the wilderness. The desert fathers, they would have to go out into the wilderness.
yeah, exactly. Because when you're in that hurry mode, or like you gotta go get something and you're very focused on material, you kind of forget the uncreated stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and the invisible world that really controls most of actually what's going on in the first place. So, I mean, so you've always been in touch with, you could say, that uncreated world, right? Like that invisible world. But
Yeah.
like for you, what does that mean?
I don't even think that I know the answer to that. I'm actually just now realizing that I obviously like have some type of a gift. It's honestly brought me, it's a really blessed thing, but it's brought me a lot of pain. Just as much have I've experienced the highs, I've literally been in a state of hell before in this reality. So I'm not really sure what that means yet. I've had some really weird stuff happen, like my epilepsy. The last time that I had a seizure, and it took years to put this into play. And this stuff sounds crazy. My story sounds crazy. So I was at a friend's house and I was staying the night there. And we were trying to sneak some boy in through the window. We were 14, 15. And we were laying there, and this bright light was so bright that it was coming up to the window. And I don't know why we rationalized it in our heads at the time that it must be the police coming. We didn't have any reason for the police to come. We were at our grandparents' house. We were trying to sneak a boy in, but it didn't make any sense in like the suburbs that the police would be approaching the window. So all I know is that we see this bright light approaching the window. I have this feeling of fear and dread come over me, and all of a sudden I was unconscious. So I woke up and everything was pitch black, and I felt my way around her room, and I flipped on the light and I couldn't see anything. It was black. I felt my way into the hallway. I was wide awake. I was really awake. I felt my way into the hallway and I flipped on the light and everything was still black. I felt my way into the bathroom and I flipped on the light and everything was pitch black, and I realized at that moment that I was blind. I was blind and I couldn't see. I felt my way back into the bedroom and I crawled in bed and I prayed myself to sleep. I prayed and I cried and I fell asleep. And I woke up in the morning and it was weird. My eyes were bulging out of my head to the point where I was like walking around like this because I didn't want anybody to look at me because I looked so scary. And I've never been able to piece that together what happened that night. It's gone through my head like, was I abducted? That's really what it seemed like, because it was a white light and then it was just I went unconscious. But I've never had a seizure ever again since that day, and the doctor swore that I was never going to grow out of it. And I would have multiple seizures a day. It wasn't like I had a seizure every now and then. It was really bad. So that's always been really interesting to me. So I guess because your question, I have so many things that have happened to me that I really don't have an answer for.
Interesting. So wait, when you say
I
a
would
ball of
love to
light
know.
though, when you say ball of light, like what do you mean by that? Because are you seeing something
It
that
wasn't
looks like
like
an
a
actual
ball of
light,
it
or is it
wasn't
like
like a ball of light. It looked like
it was like an orb that looked like
I
holographic?
no, I can't even say that. It was this white blue light that was blinding. Like, say if somebody was carrying a flashlight, but you couldn't make out the silhouette of the person that was carrying it. So all you see is this light approaching you that's kind of just floating, but it's not in a ball, it's just radiating light. It was like that. I've seen
Okay.
orbs before. This wasn't an orb, it was completely different.
Huh. So that's so I'd say that's so cool and interesting. I mean, um, the only time I've seen, because I mean, this kind of like backing up to your story of seeing Jesus too. Um, Personally, like I used to pray like 2 hours a day before I go to bed. Um, and there's one time I heard from the charismatic church and denominations that you can pray and see Jesus, and I was like so excited to do that. And I was praying for like 2 hours straight to just it was just a repetition of like, Jesus, I want to see you. Um, and then I was in my shower doing this. So like in the black of my eyes, this happened only when I closed my eyes. I would see this little tiny dot of white light.
Uh-huh.
And then in my head, I would say subconsciously, I knew that part of me was like, I know that people think I'm crazy, like because of what I'm going through, this whole awakening stuff. And so just to kind of confirm to myself, this little white light in the black of my eyes wasn't the bathroom light. I obviously looked at it and I was like, okay, let me close my eyes. Yeah, that's not it. And then next thing you know, like it became from this little dot of white light, it started moving back and forth like that. And then it started getting closer. And I felt so much dread and so much fright. And I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna lose it. And then it was too much fear. And I said, okay, I can't do this. And then the light went away. But personally, that was like the closest I've came to actually seeing or having some kind of supernatural experience to where it was like, or actually seeing Jesus. That's
Uh-huh.
closest I've been to that.
That's see, and
Um,
that's the flesh. That's the ego. Because when the ego meets God, you feel scared, like you feel like you could potentially die, because
oh
to
yeah.
come into contact with God means the death of the ego. Therefore, you feel like my friend actually just experienced this recently too, and she'd never done it before. And it feels like you're gonna die because the ego will die, and it's against God because it's a part of the flesh in your lower nature. So that's really cool. The fact that you saw light and you felt scared, it definitely was godly. That's how I take it. I did this powerful meditation one time. This is the third time that I've seen Jesus. So I've never thought about it like that. So I've seen him once dead. I've seen him once out of body and alive. And then I was doing this meditation. I have this book called Mary Magdalene Revealed. And they tell you to sit down and you imagine like you breathe in and out of your heart and you hold your hand on your heart, and then you focus on Jesus and you say something, and then all of a sudden I was walking on this beach and the waves were right to the left of me and there was a forest right to the right of me and there was this log right there. Then all of a sudden somebody comes walking out of the wood line and it was Jesus. And I went up, he sat down and I went up to him and I just hugged him and I hugged him and I sat there and I wept and I wept and I wept. And he asked me if I wanted to take a walk. And I took his hand, and this was through a meditation, and it was so real. And you could feel it in the atmosphere when I opened my eyes. I held his hand and we went on a walk, and I remember him asking me if I wanted to come home. And I was like, what about my kids? Like, what are my kids gonna do? And he told me that my kids would be taken care of. And I said I did, and at that moment, he didn't say anything. I felt it in spirit that he read the intention of my heart, and even though I really wanted to go, I wasn't willing with a clean conscience to leave what I have behind. And he looked at me. Sorry, I'm about to cry talking about this because this is really emotional. And he put his hand on my heart, and he said, anytime you want to go home, I'm right here. And he touched my heart. And he walked away, and I was screaming his name, and I was throwing a fit because he read the intention of my heart. And I decided to stay. And then I came out of it, and when I opened my eyes in my room, just it was just flooded with the Holy Spirit and the presence of God. It was really powerful. And that was during a meditation. But you can't say that that's not another reality. It wasn't imagination. It was something, it was another dimension.
Yeah, that's so like that's so powerful. I mean, what you carry in general, like inside of you, is just that's what I noticed, and especially when I reached out to you, like that's what I noticed in like your videos. Like you carry such a pure like bliss about you, and it's just very cool to be in. But it's interesting how like even the spirit like communicates to you like telepathically and can read, see all the way through you. Um, which I think since a lot of society is unconscious, a lot of communication becomes um, very, it's very like surface level, you could say. Like when we communicate, we just say kind of thoughts that our intellect comes up. But there's
Mhm.
also like on the level of the heart, there's communication and with the intuitive sense, stuff like that. Um, and I think society is barely waking up to the fact that we can communicate in those ways too, and that technology as well is kind of like you could say what we can do externalized, like with our consciousness.
Yeah.
Like for example, my sister, she's still. We talked about this yesterday. It was really funny, but there was one time where I walked into the kitchen and she was like cooking, and then I hear this thought entered into my head, and I was like, why isn't he talking to me? And, and then I'm like, I'm in there, and I take note of that. I'm like, okay, like I know that's not my thought, and the way it vibrated inside of my head, that's definitely coming from her. And so
Uh,
after like I'm kind of like just chilling, and then after that I'm like, I tell her pretty confidently, I'm like, I heard your thought, right? And then I told her, like, you want to talk to me, and then she's like, oh shoot, like I honestly don't that. Um, but
I remember the first day that I went to work, there was this, at this job I work at now, I wore this, like, it looked like a church dress, and it's called Sunrise Cafe, and it was like this long yellow dress. And I hear him say, like, oh my God, look at that dress. And he was mocking my dress, and I looked at him and I said, what about my dress? And his face turned red, and he was like, I didn't say that. I never said that out loud. He was like, I thought it. And this guy's been like, he's been tripped out ever since. That's what everything
Oh.
that we have around us is a counterfeit of the real thing. Like the World Wide Web is just a counterfeit of the collective consciousness and telepathic communication, and it's there for us to tap into. We just have to tap into it.
Yeah, exactly. And it kind of atrophies you though, like trying to rely on technology like that, because it's like, I mean, think about it, what we can do with a text, right? I can send you a message from a long distance and you'll get it, you'll see it, and then you're like, no, I'm trying to communicate.
Uh-huh.
Whereas with our minds, we can do the exact same thing. I could send you a message and you'll see the it'll notify in your head. You get a little ring,
Uh-huh.
a little vibration, boom. And
Uh-huh.
then yeah, it's so funny, like to even have these kind of abilities or awareness around it. It's really funny to kind of to know
It's
that you
also
know things and people don't necessarily know that, but
no, they don't. They don't understand it either. Like when you're thinking about somebody and you haven't talked to them in a long time, and then you finally reach out and they're like, "Man, I was just about to get a hold of you. Like you've been weighing on me." And it's like, yeah,
yeah,
it's and that's how we're meant to operate.
yeah, exactly. So like, let's talk about a little bit about quantum physics. Like, what is some of the stuff that you resonate when it comes to quantum physics?
Um, when I had my awakening or whatever, I was so overwhelmed with like all these different religions and all these different gods, but knowing Jesus at the same time. So I started praying to the first particle that existed, that was self-creating, that expanded out of itself to create everything in reality as we know it. And that's where I just got like downloaded with information. And I can't tell you verbatim what was fed to me. I knew that like I understood everything all of a sudden. I was aware that everything was the same makeup of the same spirit, and that everything that we see and every person that we come into contact with was a picture of the whole. So then I understood how everything is electromagnetism, and everything that you put out, you have to receive back. And if you want freedom on the inside, you need to give freedom on the outside. So I guess that's how it really started. I guess what Jesus would really talk about, like a reaping and sowing, and how you have to reap what you sow. And then I started getting into neuroplasticity, and then I had this epiphany, and I was like, so we like living inside of the mind of God, and everything's God. And I was like, so it's like a matrix. It really is, because 99.999% of the particles that make up atoms to make matter is actually empty space. So that's where my mental breakdown came. Like, so solidity don't even exist. It's just matter that is it's just a slower vibration. And if you can heighten the frequency and heighten the vibration, literally, like, you would be able to walk through that wall. So then I had this epiphany that like everything's like a matrix. It's like a God matrix. So the God likes to give me what I call like confirmation by revelation. So he gives me a revelation through spirit that he downloads into me, and then I will go and research, or like I'll just meet somebody or come across a book. I used to intuitively pull books off shelves to get answers. And then I found this guy when I looked at my idea, and his name is Greg Braden, and he's actually a writer of the Divine Matrix, and it's all about quantum mechanics, and it's about the makeup of reality. So I quantum mechanics really explained that consciousness controls reality, and that depending upon you and your beliefs, that reality is not objective and it's interchangeable. So how do we shift humanity? By changing our belief system. So I'm not a master at quantum mechanics. I just understand, it was revealed to me how faith works and how consciousness works through the studies that they have in quantum mechanics. Like, have you heard about the observer?
Yeah, you observe yourself.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And how reality changes depending upon the observer. So,
I saw it in
yeah.
your video, so that's where I learned that from.
Yeah. It's
That's
no, it's really amazing stuff. It's extremely amazing. And then I actually got to go see Greg Braden at a conference, and he was digging really deep into it about how So you have this wave inside of you and you have a wave outside of you, and it's the wave function particle collapse. And every single atom in your body at every single moment is going in and out of this wave function particle collapse depending upon your views, your perspective, your beliefs, and your thoughts. So it was really deep because he was saying that you're not even a person, you're really a place and space and time, depending upon your wave function particle collapse. Yeah, like I would seriously have to take notes and talk to you on a whole separate video and really break down how my views mix with quantum mechanics because that's a really deep subject to get into.
Yeah. But even if you think about that kind of stuff, I mean, some of the miracles that were performed in the Bible were basically kind of how you described it, materializing, or was it the bread and the fish? Um, Jesus
Multiplying.
walking, Jesus walking through like the crowds and stuff, and they don't see him.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very interesting the level that even he operates at. Um, I mean, and then
Well, it's really interesting because when I learned all this and God gave me this download, I started praying. This is where I'd pray for like 8, 10 hours a day, and I would ask God to give me the mind of a child, and that I wanted to experience that which is not seen. And I told God, I understand that as much faith as I have is what I can experience, and I want to experience something deeper. I want to be used as a vessel. And I have literally looked at the clouds before and asked the clouds to part and reveal the moon, and the clouds have moved out of the way. I was in a really heightened state at the time. There was I didn't start experience reality shifts before I learned about quantum mechanics and started praying like that. If you don't mind, I'll share a few of my experience that I've had because I've had more.
yeah, go ahead.
This is stuff that I don't share, but I'm going to point in my life where I'm going to start sharing what I've been through, and I don't care how people look at me and how weird they think that it is. And to some Christians, a lot of it is, and I'm a Christian, I don't mean it like that. It's just they kind of get alarmed because it's really out there stuff. But I remember when I was in the car with my mom, we were going to go clean this business, and I like something told me to look up, and I looked up at the sun, and the clouds morphed into the sun, and it created what you would call the eye of Ra or the eye of Horus. I'm not talking about resembling. I'm talking about perfect symmetry. The clouds just morphed into the sun became the pupil, and then I saw the eye of Ra or the eye of Horus. I don't remember which direction it was facing, left or right, so I can't tell you which one that it was. So that was, I think, my actual like first big reality shift besides seeing Christ. I was outside with my friend another time, and we were sitting in her backyard, and I was sitting here and she was in front of me, and like her house would have been to the left. All of a sudden my perception changed, and it felt really beautiful, but it was very strange. And I realized that I was in a different reality. And I look over to the left, and where her house would have been is actually just, it's a black hole, but it's in the shape of her house, but her house is not there. It was like it was plucked out of the picture. And it was, what do you call that, catty cornered to where it would have been. So her house was switched, and then where the neighbor's house would have been, there was another black hole. So it was really strange, and my reality would not switch back. And I talked to my friend the whole time. She couldn't see what I was seeing, but she was able to talk me through it as I was explaining to her what I was experiencing. Maybe one day she'll get on here and she'll comment and, want to be a witness to what I'm saying. So anyway, we had to go inside because my realities wouldn't switch back, and I was aware at that moment I was walking into blackness if I were to go back into her house. And in spirit, I knew that I had to take her hand and I had to trust her, and I took her hand, and she walked me up the path back into this gaping black hole where her house should be. And all of a sudden, as soon as we hit it, my reality switched back, and then everything was completely normal, and there we were again in her house.
But what do you think that like means, like seeing, or like what do you think you walked into, or like was our house probably, do you think there was something underlying happening behind the surface in there?
Mm-mm. I
Or
think it's I think it's a type of spiritual initiation where I put my trust and reliance on God. And at that moment, when I took her hand, it was like taking God's hand and saying, I trust you. And I'll walk into the darkness and I'll walk into the unknown because I know that you have me. And I get chills when I say it. That's really what it spoke to me. It was a spiritual test, and it was so beautiful.
I see. I get those like moments where I know that I'm getting tested, but like the
Yeah.
way that you experience it is like a very visual uh, way to see it, and so I think that's very interesting that you kind of described it in that way. Um,
I've had God tell me to go outside. He'll be like, I'll hear something. Not like it's not an auditory voice for anybody who's listening. It's not like go outside. No, it's an intuitive thought process. And I'll get told, go outside. I have something beautiful to show you. And I'll go outside and do you want to see a shooting star? And I'll be like, yeah. And a comet will go sweeping across the sky. And God will tell me he loves me. I've had a lot of experiences like that. I remember one morning I woke up and I was having a bad morning. I was crying out to Jesus in my bathroom, and I was with my boyfriend at the time, and he was about to get in the shower, and the Lord told me, go sit outside with me. So I go and I sit outside, and this is really where my beliefs and what God started feeding me contradicts religion and what I'm told. And it's been a big mental battle from there, like what you talked about, like clearing all that old program and the subconscious mind and limited beliefs that we have. And I sat down and God asked me if I could expect miracles. And I was like, no, I can't expect miracles. And he was like, say it. And I was like, no, that's so blasphemous. I can't just say that I can expect miracles. And he pounded it in my head. I need you to believe and say that you can expect miracles. And with the attitude, I was like, okay, I can expect miracles. And he said, stand up. I stood up, and he said, go over to that patch in your yard. And I looked down at the grass and I picked up a 4-leaf clover. And God said, you're divine. I'm going to cry telling this story. And I look back down and there's another 4-leaf clover. And God told me that I was going to perform miracles. And I looked back down and there's another 4-leaf clover. And he fed me positive affirmation about myself, about my life, my future, and who I am and how beautiful I am. I picked 48 4-leaf clovers in 3 minutes. And the clovers in my yard would not stop manifesting into 4-leaf clovers. I was aware that it wasn't going to stop, and I eventually had to stop because it's really cool when these shifts happen, but at the same time it's kind of draining. It's to be really blunt, like I don't know if you've ever taken hallucinogen. Have you ever like dropped acid or anything?
the most I've done is
And you don't
weed,
have to answer that.
but okay.
So
Okay.
it's a mind shift, and it's a reality shift, and it's really cool, but you're aware it's so different that it still feels really weird even though it's comforting. So I eventually stopped. It was so beautiful, and God said, I want you to collect these for evidence, and I want you to take them inside. The guy that I was with at the time didn't believe. He wasn't a believer. And I came inside and I just threw them all down on the table. I'm like, God told me to go outside. Look what happened. And he was like, what is this supposed to be? Some type of evidence? And I was like, yeah. Yeah, I was actually told that it's going to be evidence for you. So it was really neat. So yeah. So I'm about to finish up with my last big experience. So I started to think that I was crazy, which is why I don't mind talking about it. So I go to God and I'm like, am I schizophrenic? Am I having hallucinations? Like, I'm the only one that's experiencing this. So how do I know that I'm not crazy? And I was crying my eyes out, really starting to think that I was actually clinically insane. So my friend Becky lived next door to me at the time, and she comes over and she's having really bad panic attacks, and I'm sitting on the couch and I'm praying with her, and I'm binding some spirits and stuff like that, and just speaking peace and love into her. And she was like, I got to get outside and I got to ground. I got to go put my feet in my ground. I was so terrified to step outside because I thought that if I stepped outside that something was going to come snatch me up and that I was literally going to die. I don't think that I've ever felt doom and dread like that, aside from having epilepsy, what it feels like to about to have a seizure. So for my friend, I got myself to go outside. And we're sitting outside and we look up at the sky, and it's like partly cloudy outside and the stars are in the sky. And then all of a sudden this feeling's back. And I look at her and we look back up, and all of a sudden there were no clouds in the sky. It's completely starry. This is happening instantaneously. So I look at her and I'm like, "Are you real?" She was like, "Yeah, I'm real." She was like, "Do you feel me? I'm right here. I'm real. I see it too." And I was like, "Okay." So she starts like, Becky, like she looks like Becky, but I feel like a spirit, like she was no longer Becky. And she started pointing to the stars. And as she was pointing to the stars, they were fading out of the sky. And then all of a sudden, I look at her and we both look back up, and there's no stars in the sky whatsoever. It's completely overcasted. And then there's thousands upon thousands of fireflies all over the grass, all the way up the evergreen trees in my backyard in one corner of the yard. And it starts raining. And the rain that was coming down was not rain. It wasn't rain. It was emotion. It was love. It was compassion. It was kindness. It was childhood nostalgia. It was everything that we want to grasp in life, and those loving emotions that we want to hold on to. It was raining on us and it was filling us. And we went on this like supernatural trip for 5 hours, and it was God. And I learned a big moment in there about fear, and when we feel fear, that our greatest expansion and awakening could be happening if we would step on the other side of that fear that we feel. Because I literally thought I was going to die, and it was the most beautiful thing that I've ever experienced in my entire life.
That's amazing. Um, the only thing like where you mentioned shifts and stuff, the only time I've seen reality shifts would happen in my dreams. So like I know what you're talking about in a sense, and I could share what that dream was. So
I'd love to hear
I,
it.
I was in this room, and I think it was a classroom or something, and then there was like this row of chairs. You know, the foldable ones that, yeah, you can fold up.
Like soccer
And
chairs. Yeah.
yeah, those, and then um next thing you know, I felt somebody, a presence like kind of came over the dream, and it was like watching over it. But I knew this was like an occultist or something, and they're performing magic. So
Like dark
from,
magic.
I wouldn't even say it was dark. It was just what they were doing was like, so they kept, every time I tried to get out of the room, they kept putting another row of chairs blocking me to get out, and then kept putting a row of chairs and kept materializing it out of nowhere. But I knew it was coming, and I could sense it was coming from that occultist. And if you were to like, to kind of, you could say, integrate it to like your normal experience, like if you were to take like your peripheral vision and kind of encompass everything like that, and then you can feel something outside observing you, that's how it
Uh-huh.
felt like having that magician in that room. um so yeah, I kept doing that, and then I knew that I had to make the sign of the cross to like, get out of that spell or whatever.
I
But
got chills all over my body as you're saying this dream. Keep going. I just that's
yeah,
and I
but
feel
that's
it.
basically the end. Like I knew that I had to make the sign of the cross, and that I can also like, I could also do the same thing. But I mean, I knew that in order for me to get out of that spell, like I just had to do that. um
So when you did that, did it stop and you just woke up from it
yeah,
when you did the sign of the
I
cross?
stopped, and then that's when it ended. But
See,
um
that's real. To me, those aren't dreams.
yeah,
They
they're
are
not.
dreams, but it's happening on a spiritual plane of existence. There's something real happening that you're overcoming. I really believe that.
Yeah, so how did you start to get out of the madness of it? Because personally though, like I used to like live like that in the sense where I would hear a voice in my head, and then I would just follow it where it would lead me. But for me, my experience was negative though. I ended up kind of going a little bit mad and crazy about it because these voices would lead me, but um yeah, these voices would lead me, but I would not, nothing would happen in a sense. I could be like, oh, turn right. And then I'd follow that, thinking that it was God telling me to turn right, that I'm going to see something. So like, how did you start how do you develop discernment, and then like how did you start like
That
making sense of it?
um that's a really deep question, and I've never heard anybody else verbalize that, and I know exactly what you're talking about. So there are times where I'm told, and I've learned to realize that it's a point of mockery. So God does the same things. Like I'll be driving and he'll be like, take a right, go around the block and I'll show you something, and then I'll see something beautiful. There's other times where something that I wanted to see that spiritually feeds me. There's other times that I'm told and I follow it and nothing happens. And at those times it shakes my faith. I think just praying deeper for discernment, or like say in that moment when something tells you, God, if this is from you, let it be. If this is something that's not from you, I bind any spirit besides the voice of God and Holy Spirit of truth. I ask that you would speak. I ask that you would speak to me again. And it's moments like that to where it becomes training and you practice, and then the more that you practice, the clear and distinctive you get the voice. And then then that when you're told, that it's not the voice of God. So like if I'm driving, I'm going like 55 miles an hour, the light's red ahead of me, and something says you don't need to stop because that light's going to be green by the time. And I've just learned I don't stop. I keep going 55, and then miraculously the light turns green. Thank God, otherwise I'd probably like hit another car. But there's other times where like something will say like, oh, you don't need to stop. But it's such a subtle tone, but it's very subtle, but it's conniving and it's not being honest. And I know that. And I will stop my car anyway. And then the light actually does turn red. So I understand what you're saying. Start praying and bind anything that could be talking to you that does not have your highest intention and good. Because I believe that our angels talk to us too. It could be angels, the Holy Spirit. I mean, I don't know. The realm of all the godly things that could talk to you is a lot. So I would just start praying over it, and anything that is lying or don't have your highest intention and good. And what you can also do is ask in that moment, who is talking to me, and listen.
Yeah. Can you sense spirits on people?
Yeah, yeah,
What is
I
that?
can.
What is that like?
Um, it's a lot. I think I'm trying to get better at this because I'm just now understanding that I have, I think, what they would call the feeler gift, as far as like a feeling seer. Like say I just I don't know. I don't want to say like demons on people. I don't want to say it like that. I can tell if somebody's like really, like say like the most like smiling person in the room. I know that underneath that smile that it's a facade, and that person really has a lot of issues and stuff that they're covering up. Certain people, my energy, my aura actually just retracts, and I get a lot of anxiety. So I feel everything, but I don't specifically know what it is a lot of the time. Kind of like that. But like, okay, say I can be having the best day ever, like today, and then if I go to Kroger and I go to the grocery store, I'm gonna come out of there a completely different person, because I feel and I'm just now learning this, I pick up on people's anger and their irritability. I have what you said about reading thoughts. I've been around people and I've had some not so pretty thoughts, and I'm just now starting to learn and how to discern that I'm actually reading people's thoughts and their negative intentions and their ill intentions. So ask me again in like a year and hopefully I have this more figured out. It's a
Yeah.
lot though. I was actually just praying for somebody. It was a week ago, and I was praying and I got this really bitter taste in my mouth. And then all of a sudden, she had been telling me how she was feeling, and she kept saying that she felt like this, felt like that. And I was talking to her the night before, I was praying for her. And then when I did pray, it was like I embodied everything that she was feeling, and it was such a terrible feeling. But now I know to use this with compassion, and I try to take the stuff to God that I pick up and try to get God to cleanse it and to release this person from it. So I'm kind of trying to embody it as my own without knowing that it's mine, but still going to God to get it cleansed and to release it into the light. So that's where I'm at right now with that.
Yeah, I'm honestly learning. I'm honestly learning myself, but I made a lot of progress, I would say too. Kind of being living that aware about my feelings and my thoughts and what goes on, internally.
Tell
Uh,
me your experiences. I want to hear some. When did you start becoming aware that like this is not the way that I feel, this is somebody else?
oh man, I'll say around 2019 because that was when I could say I went through like another major spiritual shift in my life. Like at the start of COVID, that's when it all started to happen for me, and I started like meditating more, and I was like going through a bunch of mixed emotions at the time, and then as soon as I cleared that, which is that was a very big mountain for me to get through. But as soon as I
Mhm.
cleared that, that's when I started to sense like, wait a minute, I can sense people's emotions very deeply. But I'd always
Uh-huh.
have this gift as a kid, though. That was the thing. It was just I never had the maturity, I would say, to own up to it and be like, oh, this is, not me here. But I had the compassion and the empathy as a kid in my heart to be like, want to experience people's emotions and take it on as mine. But I guess I didn't have the developed mind to just be like, identify stuff and um, stuff like that. So I'm trying to remember the first kind of things that
Were
um
you friends with the outcast and stuff in school?
yeah, I mean,
And you
I was
had
friends with
that,
I was actually friends with everybody, but I
yeah, yeah,
could
but
get
you
on
had
with
a
the
heart for
outcast.
the outcast. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah, I could feel
Um
that. Yeah.
yeah, so I just in general, like I've always put myself in people's shoes, like literally. And I know you can actually do that. Like I can sense when like girls are feeling me out like from a distance away. I can
Uh-huh.
sense when like someone's directing thoughts towards me. Like it's very odd. Like you could do it to yourself. That's a start. Like if you just bring your attention to your feet and to your hands and you kind of just focus and start to put more focus into it, you can sense when that's happening. And so like when I started meditating, I started to notice how like that same focus would come in different
Huh.
essences, if you will. So I could feel someone's focus or direction start coming towards me. Um, but when it came to like drawing the lines between that being the person and or the person's emotions being separate from mine, when it came to drawing the line between that took a lot of work to be able to be like, it's a very subtle layer, if you will. Like I have my own feelings and I would start to feel like this, just something inside of me, like just add on to that layer. That's kind of how I
Yeah.
experienced it.
Kind of like creeping up on you,
Yeah, creeping up on me. And then
hovering. Yeah. Yep.
in a good way and bad good ways and bad ways, there's good
Yeah.
emotions and bad ones. But that's how I kind of experienced it. It's just a layer that happens like that. And then to be able to kind of just like not allow it to cling like that and just allow it just to like kind of just subtly be above your emotion and not necessarily allow it to attach is I guess what I'm training in, you could say. Um,
Well, whatever you learn, please send it my way because this is just something that I know I really am trying to learn how to do it because for years this has happened to me and I get so absorbed into like thinking about what's wrong and why I feel the way that I feel it sends me into like a downward spiral and I let it consume me and I take it on as being my own and I'm trying to learn how to separate it so I can just get rid of it and it don't, cling to me and stick.
I know what you mean because like I'm surrounded by I would say of negative energy a lot. So for me, that does send me into a downward spiral as well. Um, and for me though, it tears me because it's like either I find a way through it or I try to like dissociate from it. That's kind of
Mhm.
like what I try to do. So if I get the emotion, I'll just be like, you know what, I'll take it in as mine and I'll feel every single thing that I feel in that moment. And then what happens is I guess I've created an atmosphere in myself to where my upper head space is like open.
Mhm.
So like if there feels like there's this literal I don't know, there just feels like an opening here, if you will.
Mhm.
And I'll feel the emotion come up and then just like come out. And so I
Hmm.
feel a lot of the time, like when I experience somebody's emotions, before in the past, it would come in and I just hold it in, and then it'd be all like angsty like that.
Yeah, it
But
happened to
now
me
it's
last
like,
night. You get all tense and shriveled up, kind of. Yeah.
yeah, that's what happened. And then, but now it's been like, I've created an atmosphere where it's just like, it just goes, but there's still some where I get all shriveled up and I'm just like, I need to like clench myself.
Yeah.
And then, but that's kind of how I dealt with it. And
See,
so
it's so
I'll just have
awesome when you meet other people that have the same experiences. That way, that you know that it's not just like you that goes through this stuff. So that's
yeah,
really
exactly.
refreshing to hear you say.
Yeah, so I think a lot of it has to do with dealing with your own trauma, because if you have a certain, if something hits you and then it reacts, it creates a certain reaction in you, you could say.
Uh-huh.
If someone's emotions create a reaction within you, it kind of shows there's some kind of level of disharmony inside of you, to where you're not necessarily operating as a sovereign individual.
Uh-huh.
So instead of choosing to respond, you're kind of just reacting based off someone else's emotions, which is again, it takes a life. This feels like a lifelong process to go through, to like learn how to respond instead of react and be like emotionally like um quick to react.
I think that, like, in my case, I do have a lot of childhood trauma from like seizures, just different things I really don't want to get into. But I think that in the midst of that trauma, I think that there's like a block in the spiritual body to where it don't pass through correctly, if that makes any sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So I'm trying to figure out how to overcome that and how to like get that block out of my body and heal myself that way that it can properly pass.
Yeah, for me personally right now, it's I have a lot of stagnation. I've cleared a lot of stuff, but the main thing for me right now is that there's such a tight um tension in my chest. Like it's so like um it's really painful, and I've been avoiding it in myself. I had
Uh-huh.
a friend who, he's very intuitive. He's actually on one of my his name is Connor. He's on one of my
His
podcasts.
name's Connor. Okay, maybe
Yeah.
I'll check it out.
But him and I, we had a, oh, okay, this could be an example to where I shared it in the podcast. We talked about it. But so he was actually tripping on, oh no, okay, no, that's another story. We'll get to this one first. Like he was we were both in a fish, a poke place. It's like a sushi
Uh-huh.
place. Um and again, I'll keep it like this. There's two people came in. I'll keep it very general. It was two people that came in, and I noticed that he reacted. I felt in myself some kind of like uncomfortable reaction in my emotions. And at first, I was luckily I had like my mind clear, so I knew that emotion did not come from me. My mind was completely clear. I felt good. Everything felt pure. And then I felt myself emotionally like just get all like angsty. I didn't
Uh-huh.
react to it. I was able to respond to it and choose how I wanted to in my mind, deal with the situation. But I chose to in that situation kind of point out like, dude, were you feeling uncomfortable when those two people walked in? Like I asked him that, and then
Uh-huh.
he's like, yeah, how'd you know? And then I was like, that's
Because
when he
you
kind
felt
of
like he
opened up
was
about
feeling.
what?
Because you were feeling what he was feeling.
Yeah, exactly. I felt it
Yeah.
as if it was me too.
Uh-huh.
So okay, I'm trying to piece together stuff. But going back to my first point I was talking about, like there's this very tight tension in my chest that makes me stagnate. I don't know where it comes from, but it makes me stagnate. And I know that if something, I don't know what could break me or make that tension in my chest come up to the surface, but I know that there can be situations in my life that God might put me through to where now this tension is going to come up, and this high charge of emotions going to come up in some situation, and I have to deal with it and purge it out of myself.
Huh.
So I've been doing a lot of inner work, so nothing really bothers me that much. But I know that the next thing for me to deal with when it comes to my evolution is that there's some other energies that I kind of make me uncomfortable in my own self. But I'm willing to like go the extra mile every single day. I'm doing this stuff. So I'm that committed to mastering my own emotions and self and
In
clearing
what
stuff.
situations do you feel that heaviness on your chest, like that? Does it kind of make it feel like it's a little bit harder to breathe, like it's a little restricted, and you kind of
Yeah.
just feel? What situations do you feel that in?
I don't um
I've
well
walked
for
into people's houses where it kind of takes my breath away and it collects on top of my chest.
yes, when I'm home, that's a big one. Um
When you're home,
yeah.
it
And
sounds like
then
your house needs to be cleansed.
yes, to be
No,
honest,
really.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's no, but it's hard to be honest, it's very hard though. This I'm in a situation to where it's literally almost impossible to do that just because I live with six other people and my house is very pretty small. So it's not like if I do, I've done it. I have sage and stuff. So I've tried to clear it, but it just keeps getting backed up again. And I'm just
It's
like, what the
mingled energy. I'm not saying anything about the people that you live with. I don't even know them, but it's something that probably contradicts something in your aura. Therefore, you can feel it in your atmosphere. When you live with other people, you can't control everything that goes out. So
yeah,
I understand when you say you can't really completely cleanse it.
exactly. Yeah. So um that's the main thing though. When it comes to like dealing with emotions and energy, stuff like that. It's just you kind of notice when those charges come inside of you. And I liked how you talked about you bring it into the light. So I don't necessarily know how to fully pull those like if someone had like a you could say an anxiety, right? And it enters into me. I know that you can take your attention or take your consciousness or just like how you would bring your awareness to from your hand to your um you can like just do it without moving your arm. You can take your attention from the base of the or from the tip of your fingertips all the way to your shoulder. Like you can consciously do that. So when
Hmm.
someone's anxiety comes into you like that, you can kind of take that same mechanism and just shoot it out to something. I know that you
Hmm.
can get to that level to like control it like that. And then when you say bring it to light, I wouldn't necessarily know how to penetrate into that level of light to where I can take someone's emotion or soul into that. Well, I could say I've done it once maybe, but it wasn't like I was intentionally doing it. I had this one friend who was going through a lot of depression and suicide and or let me back up. It's not necessarily I want to say friend. It was just someone that I knew at the time, and he was like, "Oh, like can you take me to your church?" And I thought to myself, I was like church. Like I was against church. I was very hurt by it. So I was like,
Hmm.
but also like I knew that there's also to church he would get trapped as well. So
Hmm.
I was like, nah, like you and me, we can go to the park and I'll help you out. And this, at the time though, I was very spiritually low. Like I was at such a low vibration, but I was like, I can take care of this. And then we went to the park, and then I started praying for him. I started praying for Jesus to, deliverance stuff like that, casting out those
Hmm.
spirits. And he started every time I prayed for him, I said like a prayer, a couple lines. He would notice that his vision started getting lighter, or clearer, and
Yeah.
brighter.
Yep.
And then I kept doing it till he finally broke through, and or I just kept doing it, and then he started noticing that his body started vibrating very intensely. And then next thing you know, like he opened his eyes again. He's like, "Hey, I see a white light." And then that brought me back to my experience when I was in the shower
With
praying
the
and I
white
saw a
light.
white light. I was like, okay, like close your eyes, wait for that thing to or wait for something to happen. Something's gonna happen. And then probably after a couple of minutes, he opened his eyes again. He's like, I saw like yeah, he had a vision, but he saw like these dark entities surrounding him. And then they're surrounding him. I think was he in a kit? No, they're just surrounding him, and there's just dark
Hmm.
presence around him. And then he saw these three people on white horses with shining bright faces come out of nowhere, and then these things just started to scatter. And then from there, he saw a book open up, and then it opened up to chapter one. And then this whole book of his, I think I don't know sure if it was of his life or something, but he just saw a book open up to chapter one, and then that was the
That's
experience.
powerful. That's really powerful. But he don't know what the book was.
Nah, I don't know if I try to get more out of him, but I guess he was too. It was I
Too much for him?
yeah, it was something new. You experience something new. It's kind of like you don't know. You kind of just focus on like what the heck's happening, and you can't necessarily describe. Like if I try
Some
to
people have the
question him,
most powerful experiences, then they just want to try to like, and I'm not saying he did, but a lot of people like trying to like rationalize, like, okay, I made that up, or and then they don't want to
yeah,
talk about it.
yeah. So I think when we talk about bringing it to the light, I think that some people have that power to penetrate into those higher dimensions and take someone there, which takes a lot of courage, like or facing those fears and things like that. Like personally, I had to face his demons. Like,
Yeah,
and anybody who wants to like do deliverance on people, you have to face those demons as well. And I think that sometimes people put, and even myself, I became more conscious of this as doing it back then. I used to do deliverance. I don't really do it anymore, to be honest. But um, sometimes I would face demons that I wasn't ready to face, and then it would send me down into a dark downward spot or a downward spiral. So I think that yeah, you kind of have to like know where you're at and kind of take little baby steps or shifts if you need to into the right direction with
I
all the stuff.
I've done the same thing, and I've kind of taken a break from it lately because I have like done deliverances on people. I did a really powerful deliverance on my nephew, but even praying for people and laying hands on people and trying to do deliverance, I've had a lot of it backlash to where I do it and the person feels better, but then all of a sudden I'm not okay. And I don't know how to deal with it. So Christianity and spirituality, like it's the same thing and it's kind of different at the same time. So in spirituality, it'd just be energy. In Christianity, we know it as spirits. But I'm understanding now that it's a mingle of the two. Sometimes it really is just energy. It's somebody else's depression, their anxiety, the way they feel. And other times it's really a spirit that oppresses the person that you're trying to deal with. I got attacked a few months ago, and no matter what I did, this thing would not detach from me. It would not leave me alone. I had a mental breakdown. Every time I prayed to God, it wasn't working. Every time that I tried to tell this thing, tried to bind it and get it off me, it wasn't working. And it came to the point where I just spoke over myself and I was like, look, I don't know who you are and I don't know what's wrong. I'm really sorry that you feel like this. You don't have to feel like this. And I cried with it. This is really weird. And I filled it with love and compassion. And I told it that it could be released and that it could go back into the light and it could just go back to God. And this thing lifted off of me and I was amazed. So now I'm even wondering in certain instances, is it really a demon like that, or is it a spirit that needs releasement and they cling to people with light because you know how to release it and it needs assistance? Because it worked.
That's interesting. I never thought of stuff. That's interesting.
It's getting angry, like, yeah, I cast you into hell and da 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 da. Like maybe that's not always the answer. But just like you said, there's different tiers of spirits and there's different ways of dealing with all of them. So that's something that I'm trying to expound on right now as far as how to deal, with being so sensitive to the spiritual realms and things that, get attached and cling.
yeah, like I'm gonna say this very vague, so I don't necessarily or say anything. But like I'm at this one place that I go to, and I go to this place pretty constantly, and I notice that there's a certain energy there. Like you feel it in the pit of your stomach, like that little anxiety.
And not
And I
yet.
started noticing that that was a spirit that was literally getting energetically passed around to everybody in that area.
Hmm.
Um, and the reason why I started seeing that it was a spirit was like I could literally almost see it in a sense, like materialize or like I'll say almost become like holographic on somebody where I felt the thing, I started feeling it very deeply, and then I started seeing the thing kind of pop up.
Hmm.
Um, and so it's like I go to this place constantly, so I always like when I kind of do deliverance on myself, one thing that I'll notice is that like my I have my eyes closed and then I start seeing everything in the dark of my eyes just like shift and get all like weird. And it feels like I'm kind of going down. Like it literally feels like if you're on a roller coaster and you start going zoom. I
Have
just
you
feel
ever
myself
seen like faces and stuff that manifest in your third eye when you
that
close your
happen
eyes?
that happens
Scary
to me
faces,
sometimes.
spiders.
Happens to
Yeah.
happens to me sometimes. this instance, it wasn't necessarily a face. It was just like a shifting darkness that I couldn't necessarily couldn't make out what it was, the image was. But yeah,
Hmm.
a face is our common thing that people get, and they'll claim it's just intrusive thoughts and kind of just
Imagination.
dumb it down and imagination.
Hmm.
But it is in a sense, I don't know. It is in a sense imagination, but imagination is spiritual. We have to understand that, I would say.
Hmm.
But I just one instance when it came to deliverance, like that came to my mind. So
Yeah, these are really good conversations. These really are. This is nice.
yeah. Well, let's come to a close here.
Okay.
And where can people find you?
So I have a YouTube channel. They can find me on YouTube, Facebook. My name is Amber Heard. I know I'm the joke of the season right now because my name's Amber. My last name is spelled Hurd, and you'll see on the back of my profile it says Quantum Kingdom Coaching. I do have a website that I'm still in the process of building, so I own my domain and I have it half built, but it's not really up and running yet. So, and then email. And I really want to, I'm building a platform right now of interviewing myself. And if anybody would like to share their story or has any similar experience, and if anybody thinks they have the answer to anything that I said today, that'd be awesome too. So my email is Amber, HURD88 at gmail.com. And you can also find me on Facebook. And are you going to be posting this?
Yes, I will.
Okay. Yeah, you can just, I'll send you my YouTube channel. Do you have a Facebook or anything?
Yes, I do.
You do?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your, let me write that down really quick.
We
What's your name?
we'll take care of this after. But
Okay. All
and
right.
anything else you want to share with people? Any pieces of advice or anything, last words that you haven't said yet?
If I were to give anybody advice, any last words, it would be that your thoughts control your reality, your words control reality, the things you speak over yourself controls your reality, and the people that you decide to spend your time around that speak over you controls you, and that you are a co-creator of God, and that you do consciously create with everything that you think and everything that you say. And even if you're sick and you need healing, if you're depressed, I ask that you would just pray and that you would speak life over to yourself and make sure that you're always surrounding yourself with people who love you, that are going to speak life into you, and keep yourself surrounded with like-minded individuals. That's really all that's weighing on my heart.
All right, awesome, Amber. Thank you for coming on.
Well,
Such a good
Ezekiel, nice
conversation.
talking to you.
Nice
Yeah,
talking
if
to
you
you.
ever want to do a part two, let me know. We can go further. I know we really didn't get too far, but it's a lot to
Yeah,
talk about.
100%. All right.